In the shadowy outskirts of the school, a dilapidated Russian waste van sat ominously in a quiet, secluded area. The van's exterior was a patchwork of rust and dents, its paint peeling and windows clouded with grime, giving it an air of neglect and disrepair. Inside the dimly lit back of the van, a group of rough-looking thugs sat huddled together, their expressions hardened and their postures tense. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, as if they were waiting for something or someone. Among them, a burly man with a muscular frame and a builder's uniform stood out. His arms were adorned with intricate tattoos. He glanced down at his phone as it buzzed with a new message, his eyes narrowing as he read the contents. Turning to his companions, he relayed the orders in a low, gravelly voice. It was Noel's command. The man's tone was cold and deliberate as he added that if the boy, Jang Hyun, dared to interfere with Noel's plan, he was to be eliminated swiftly and without hesitation. With the exception of one, the group listened carefully, their faces displaying a mixture of grim determination and focus. One person sat a little apart from the others, his head turned away, the brim of a cap pulled low over his eyes, hiding his face. No one seemed to notice him much, but his detachment and silence distinguished him from the others. The quiet that had settled over the group was suddenly shattered by the sharp metallic sound of a gun being cocked. One of the thugs, a wiry man with a scowl etched across his face, broke the silence. He remarked that if they only needed to kill one brat, then Miguel should be able to handle the mission on his own. Another teammate, a bulky man with a skeptical expression, chimed in, his tone laced with doubt. He questioned whether Miguel was really that good, pointing out that all he had seen him do was flirt with women every chance he got. It didn't exactly scream professionalism, he added. As this was going on, the dark-haired man seated struggled with his own weapon, attempting and failing to cock it with trembling hands. His face was flushed with frustration and disappointment, but the others ignored him, concentrating on the topic of conversation. Another voice joined the conversation, this one belonging to a lean man with a thick accent. He mentioned that Miguel was quite famous in Spain, adding a hint of admiration to his tone. He wondered if Miguel was a matador, or at least the kind of guy who tormented bulls for a living. The question lingered, adding an air of mystery to the enigmatic figure they were discussing. Amid the tense discussions, one teammate remained unbothered, his focus entirely on the dark-haired man struggling with his malfunctioning gun. With a calm yet commanding demeanor, he reached out and gestured for the weapon, his voice steady as he told the man to hand it over so he could inspect it. The dark-haired man hesitated for a moment, his eyes widening in surprise, before reluctantly passing the gun to his companion. The man took the weapon with practiced ease, his fingers moving deftly as he examined it. With a single, fluid motion, he cocked the gun, the sharp metallic click echoing through the van. His expression darkened as he turned to the owner of the weapon, his voice laced with a mix of frustration and disdain. He pointed out that the gun's maintenance was a complete mess, his tone sharp and unforgiving. A gun, he added, shouldn't be breaking down so easily, especially not in the hands of someone who relied on it. The tension in the van grew thicker as another teammate, a lean man with a sharp gaze, interjected. His eyes narrowed as he studied the man who had fixed the gun, his voice cold and probing. He asked which organization the man worked for, his tone dripping with suspicion. He added that the face before him wasn't familiar, and as he spoke, he casually pulled out a short knife. The man in question, who had been sitting quietly with his cap pulled low, finally reacted. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and removed his cap, revealing a face that was calm but carried an air of quiet menace. His lips curled into a faint, knowing smile as he locked eyes with the lean man. The question made sense, he admitted, his voice smooth and measured, because he wasn't actually on their side. It was Sion. His blue eyes bore into the lean man's, unflinching and intense, as a shadow of a smile crept across his face. Back in the schoolyard, the air was thick with tension as Jang Hyun, his humanity seemingly stripped away, raised his hands like claws, his fingers curled and poised to strike. His eyes burned with a feral intensity as he lunged forward, aiming to swipe down at Miguel with a force that was both brutal and unrelenting. The two men were suspended in midair for a fleeting moment, the world around them a blur as Jang Hyun slashed at Miguel once more, his movements swift and predatory. Miguel, caught off balance, struggled to maintain his grip on his weapons, one of his spikes slipping from his hand and clattering to the ground below. Both men landed heavily, their feet planting firmly on the ground as they regained their footing. Jang Hyun crouched low, his body coiled like a spring, his face shadowed and dark, his expression unreadable but radiating menace. His posture was unmistakably offensive, every muscle in his body primed for another attack. Miguel, breathing heavily, steadied himself and quickly assessed the situation. He couldn't help but notice how drastically Jang Hyun had changed since the beginning of their fight. The boy before him was no longer the same opponent he had faced earlier. There was something wild, something untamed about him now. As these thoughts raced through Miguel's mind, Jang Hyun surged forward again, his claws slicing through the air with terrifying speed. Miguel barely managed to dodge the attack, his reflexes kicking in just in time to evade the deadly strike. The movement was so fast, so unnatural, that it sent a shiver down Miguel's spine. He told himself, almost in disbelief, that the kid's movements were no longer those of a human being. They were something else entirely, something primal, something beastly. The realization settled over him like a heavy weight, and he knew that he was no longer fighting a man, but a creature driven by instinct and rage. Despite the dire situation, Miguel remained calm, his composure unshaken. Slowly, he slipped his left hand into the inside pocket of his jacket, retrieving a red flag he referred to as the Red Capote. Holding it aloft, he fixed his gaze on Jang Hyun, his voice steady and resolute as he declared that his side would never lose the fight. His confidence was unwavering, even as the tension in the air thickened. Standing nearby on an elevated platform with a view of the altercation, Rachel's eyes widened in shock upon seeing the Red Capote. Miguel looked up at her, speaking to her in a firm but strangely courteous tone. He called out, "Señorita Rachel," telling her to keep quiet and stay put, although he acknowledged, somewhat embarrassed, that it felt awkward to say that to her. As she struggled to comprehend the scene before her, Rachel's mind raced, and she was rendered speechless. Miguel's attention returned to Jang Hyun as he raised the Red Capote high, its vibrant fabric fluttering in the air. He spoke again, his voice carrying a weight of solemnity as he explained to Rachel that the fight she was witnessing was not just a physical clash, it was a battle between the pride of man and the savagery of a beast. His words hung in the air, charged with meaning, as he held the capote before Jang Hyun, almost like a challenge. Jang Hyun, his body coiled and ready, prepared to strike, his eyes locked on Miguel with a feral intensity. But Miguel, undeterred, met his gaze with a confident smile, his expression calm and taunting. He beckoned Jang Hyun closer, his demeanor daring and unyielding, as if inviting the beast to test its strength against the pride of man. The tension between them was palpable, a silent standoff that seemed to stretch time itself. Jang Hyun lunged at Miguel with a ferocious leap, his clawed hands slicing through the air like blades. Miguel, calm and composed, waved his Red Capote in front of Jang Hyun, the vibrant fabric fluttering as if taunting him. But Jang Hyun's claws tore through the capote, ripping a hole in the once pristine fabric. However, Miguel was no longer there. He had vanished in the blink of an eye. Before Jang Hyun could react, Miguel reappeared behind him, his hand landing firmly on Jang Hyun's shoulder. Balancing effortlessly mid-air, Miguel flashed a confident smile, his other hand gripping a sharp spike. In one fluid motion, he soared over Jang Hyun, leaving the younger man momentarily stunned and speechless. With a powerful swing, Miguel slammed the spike across Jang Hyun's back, the force of the blow sending him crashing to the ground. The spike narrowly missed Jang Hyun's head, embedding itself into the floor beside him. As Jang Hyun lay there, dazed and struggling to recover, he suddenly lashed out with a powerful kick, striking Miguel squarely in the stomach and sending him stumbling backward. Miguel, though winded, reassured himself that the fight was unfolding exactly as it should. He quickly regained his footing, his movements sharp and deliberate. With a swift motion, he opened his jacket, revealing the inside lined with rows of small capsules, 50 in total. Jang Hyun, who had been poised to attack, paused momentarily, his body freezing as he looked up at Miguel. His expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as he took in the sight of the capsules and the unwavering intensity in Miguel's eyes. Miguel lunged at Jang Hyun with explosive speed, his hand darting to one of the capsules inside his jacket. In one fluid motion, he hurled it toward Jang Hyun. The capsule soared through the air, transforming mid-flight into a sharp, metallic spike that slammed into the ground with a resounding crash, right where Jang Hyun had stood just seconds earlier. Dust and debris scattered as the spike embedded itself deeply into the earth. Jang Hyun, his reflexes razor-sharp, had already leaped backward, narrowly avoiding the deadly strike. His body moved with almost inhuman agility. However, Miguel didn't stop. His momentum unbroken, he charged relentlessly at Jang Hyun, more capsules now tightly gripped between his fingers. With a sharp, commanding shout, he called out, "Banderillo!" and hurled the capsules toward his opponent. Mid-air, the capsules transformed into sharp, gleaming spikes, their trajectories precise and calculated. The spikes shot forward like guided missiles, fanning out to surround Jang Hyun in a pincer formation, cutting off his escape routes and leaving him with little room to maneuver. Rachel, standing at a distance, watched the unfolding battle with wide eyes, utterly astonished by Miguel's fighting prowess. Until now, she had no idea just how skilled he truly was. Her heart raced as she took in the intensity of the clash, her mind struggling to keep up with the rapid exchange of blows. Miguel, however, remained entirely focused on the fight. As he leaped into the air once more, his movements fluid and precise, he called out to Jang Hyun, his voice steady, but laced with intensity. "I'm a bullfighter, kid," he declared, as if the statement alone carried the weight of his resolve. In mid-air, he pulled out another weapon, a sharp, gleaming blade, and thrust it toward Jang Hyun with deadly accuracy. But Jang Hyun, ever alert and fueled by a feral instinct, noticed the attack just in time. With reflexes that seemed almost inhuman, he twisted his body and delivered a powerful kick to Miguel's face. The impact was brutal, the force of the blow causing Miguel's neck to snap back with a sickening crack. Staggered, Miguel stumbled, his mind reeling as he tried to make sense of the situation. He couldn't understand why this beast, this relentless, untamed force, was attacking him with such unbridled passion. Yet Miguel, displaying remarkable resilience, absorbed the force of the kick and retaliated with a devastating blow of his own. His strike landed with crushing impact, sending Jang Hyun reeling backward until his back slammed against the spiked walls that now surrounded them. The spikes dug into the space around him, limiting his movements and trapping him in a precarious position. Jang Hyun turned his head slightly, his eyes flickering to the menacing spikes that hemmed him in. When he shifted his gaze back to Miguel, he saw him charging forward, a spike gripped tightly in his hand like a spear, his expression fierce and unyielding. Closing the distance between them in an instant, Miguel thrust the spike forward with a forceful cry, "Adios, amigo!" The sharp tip aimed directly at Jang Hyun, poised to pierce him. But just before the spike could make contact, Jang Hyun, with lightning-fast reflexes, gripped the embedded spikes on either side of him with both hands. Using them as leverage, he pushed himself upward, his body lifting off the ground in a display of agility that left Miguel momentarily stunned. Jang Hyun swung his body mid-air, his leg rising high as he locked eyes with Miguel. With a brutal, calculated swing, he delivered a powerful kick squarely to Miguel's chin. The impact was immense, snapping Miguel's head backward and sending a spray of blood bursting from his mouth. The force of the blow sent Miguel flying backward, his body crashing to the ground with a heavy thud as he landed flat on his back. Jang Hyun, meanwhile, landed gracefully on his feet, his movements fluid and controlled. His breathing was heavy, but his stance remained steady, his eyes fixed on Miguel with unrelenting focus. Miguel, groaning in pain, shifted his body, his face now pressed against the ground. Blood dripped from his mouth as he pushed himself up slightly, his voice low but defiant. He wasn't done yet. Miguel's mind flashed back to a vivid memory, standing in the center of a bull ring, the sun blazing overhead. In one hand, he held his capote, the red fabric fluttering in the breeze, and in the other, a sharp spike. He had faced countless beasts in that arena, each one tamed by his skill and precision. He had always been the one to deliver the final blow. But the creature before him now, Jang Hyun, was unlike anything he had ever encountered. This wasn't a beast that could be tamed by human hands. No, this was something far worse, a monster. Jang Hyun crouched low, his body coiled like a predator ready to strike. His posture was unmistakably offensive, his movements fluid and deliberate, like a tiger preparing to devour its prey. Miguel, despite the pain coursing through his body, forced himself back to his feet. He began to walk toward Jang Hyun, his steps measured and deliberate. This time, he told himself, he wouldn't act out of pride or arrogance. This time, he would be smarter. Suddenly, Miguel's gaze shifted away from Jang Hyun, landing on something in the distance. In a swift, calculated motion, he hurled his weapon toward a fire extinguisher. The impact caused the extinguisher to burst, releasing a thick cloud of foam that quickly filled the air. Rachel, watching from a distance, gasped as Miguel's figure disappeared into the hazy mist. She couldn't help but feel a mix of surprise and disbelief at what she could only interpret as a cowardly act. Miguel, seizing the opportunity, turned and bolted from the school's gymnasium. His mind raced as he ran, his thoughts a chaotic whirl. He couldn't believe he had encountered such a monster here, of all places, in Korea. If he couldn't defeat it, he told himself, he would have to find another way to hunt it down. Nearby, the shadowy figure of an observer watched silently as Miguel fled in fear, his once confident demeanor shattered. Breathless and panicked, Miguel hurried to the van where his teammates were waiting. His voice urgent as he announced that there had been a change of plans. Jang Hyun, he explained, was a total monster, far beyond anything they had anticipated. They would need to use explosives to blow the entire area away. But as the door slid open, Miguel froze. Sitting inside the van, his shoulders slightly hunched and his arms resting on his knees, was Sion. His expression was stern, his eyes locked on Miguel with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. Miguel, caught off guard, hesitated. Before he could react, Sion's hand shot out, gripping Miguel's hair with a force that made him wince. Sion's voice was low, but filled with anger as he demanded to know who Miguel thought he was. Without waiting for an answer, Sion slammed Miguel's face into the floor of the van, the impact reverberating through the vehicle. Sion's words were sharp and cutting. He berated Miguel for talking about blowing up the school, a place filled with innocent students. His tone was laced with disgust as he continued, saying he was glad to have caught Miguel now so he could question him further. Miguel gritted his teeth in frustration, the weight of Sion's hand pressing his face into the floor, making it nearly impossible to move. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light inside the van, he noticed his teammates slumped unconscious in the back. Sion's voice cut through the tension once more. He explained that Miguel's teammates didn't know much about Noel's plan, but he was hoping Miguel would be more informed. Without another word, Sion yanked Miguel fully into the van, the door sliding shut behind them. The air inside was thick with tension, and Miguel knew there was no escaping what was to come. Back in the school gymnasium, Jang Hyun bent down to pick up his dirt-streaked cloth from the ground. Nuna had been right about Noel. He clenched his jaw at the thought. Rachel, dressed in her usual lab coat, walked toward him casually. Jang Hyun didn't lift his head as he began wrapping the filthy cloth around his injured hand. The truth had finally settled in. Noel had deceived him. Yet the brutal fight with Miguel had drained him, his body finally giving in. His vision blurred, his knees buckled. Rachel caught him just in time, steadying him in her arms. "You're really pushing yourself too hard," she said softly, concern lacing her voice. "That wound Miguel gave you must hurt like hell." She adjusted her grip, supporting his weight as they made their way out of the gym. Then, with a teasing lilt, she added, "You know, there's something called appreciation for the person treating your wounds." A small smirk played on her lips. "Guess I'll have to patch you up again." Jang Hyun exhaled, shaking his head. "It's fine," he muttered. But deep down, he knew. He was alone in this. Not far away, a man clad in a black tank top spoke into his phone, his voice devoid of emotion. The response from the other end was brief but clear. "Eliminate them both." The man watched as Rachel and Jang Hyun left the gym. Eden stepped forward, silent, precise. He raised his nail gun and leveled it at Rachel's temple. She didn't notice, too focused on keeping Jang Hyun upright. A sharp, mechanical hiss filled the air. The shot rang out. Rachel's blonde hair whipped from the force of the close-range impact. Jang Hyun's breath caught in his throat as he watched, frozen in place, helpless. Blood sprayed across the floor, painting the gymnasium in crimson. Rachel's body slumped. Eden, still holding the phone to his ear, barely spared her a glance. His gaze remained cold, indifferent, as she collapsed.